Bob Masterson joins me now from Ottawa. He's the president and CEO of the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada. Bob, great to have you back on the program.
Thank you, Angie.
When we spoke with you earlier in the week, you talked about the concerns, of course, concerns about some of those fixed items that need to be brought back and forth, that are brought back and forth on the rail line. We're now on day 10, day 11. Where are we at right now?
Yeah, well, I think let's talk about some good news, some better news, and some very not good news. And I think the good news, and Mr. Finn just spoke to this, with the removal of the blockade in New Hazelton, goods are generally starting to move again in Western Canada. That's good news. And I talked about our industry supplying some very important commodities that are important from a public safety, public security standpoint, things like chlorine for municipal drinking water. My understanding is yesterday, large volumes of chlorine did move around Western Canada from Saskatchewan and Vancouver to municipal customers, and that's probably buys a lot of time if this situation goes on. But Western Canada beginning to come back to service. The good, or let's say the somewhat better news, let's call it, is, while the railway is not working at all in Quebec and Atlantic Canada, any points east of Belleville, CN and our companies, our member companies, are working extremely hard around the clock to be inventive, to find ways to get these key products like propane, like chlorine, into the municipalities where they can go. And that is happening as best as it can. Let's talk about the not so good news, and perhaps then we'll look forward. But the not so good news, I think people have to understand, and they probably will come Tuesday morning, this isn't a rail blockade any longer. It's not a protest any longer. It's an economic blockade of Quebec and Atlantic Canada. 70% of all the goods, all the physical goods, all the things we can touch with our hands that are produced in or imported into Canada, they touch the railways at some point. And as of now, as of midnight tonight, the system, CN will not carry any product from anywhere in North America to any point east of Belleville. It will not take any product from anywhere east of Belleville, anywhere else on the system. And again, just doing emergency operations to move other things around. So I would say, and don't take my word for it, but the Association of Quebec Municipalities has said the situation is very urgent and called for urgent measures. We're seeing plants close already and shut down, and I would expect that will pick up steam early this week if we can't find a settlement to this issue. And
as well, of course, as you're saying, with those plants closing, we are looking at job loss. You heard Sean Finn there saying that they would be looking at laying off some people, depending on, some people, things are back up and running, as you say, but in other places they're not. Of course, looking at, as you mentioned there, Belleville, Ontario, and there's no end in sight as far as we know. Talks have been happening. But what do you think this says in terms of our reputation outside of the country?
Well, I guess let me just say one other thing first. I think, Canadians have a lot of empathy, a lot of concern, and want the right outcome to occur between Indigenous peoples and the rest of the country on the nation-to-nation basis. And the Belleville blockade is part of that, and there's extra patience for that. There's an understanding of that. I think what there's no empathy for and there's no support for is the random acts, like we just heard from Mr. Finn a minute ago about people, trespassing on rail property, starting fires inside rail yards where there's cars of fuel and chlorine and these other things. Like, this is where we have to have a clear message. Yes, we have to change our relationship, our relationship with Indigenous people, but we can't tolerate trespassing and blockading a normal activity by people that have no relationship to that situation between Indigenous people in Belleville and the government. So that's one thing I'd say. The second thing, I think you've raised a very important point. It's not the time to deal with it right now. We have to get through this crisis. We're all focused on how we can move these critical public safety goods around. But make no mistake, Canada, people have invested in Canada because it's stable and we have rule of law and we have infrastructure. And again, let's put aside the situation in Belleville. That is a different situation. But the general lawlessness we're seeing around the railways, around Niagara Falls, that says something loud to international investors, as does the fact that this is our fourth major rail disruption in 35 months. it asks questions, and we'll see how that plays out. And,
Yeah.
and we won't know. We won't know tomorrow. We will know 5 or 6 years from now.
Right,
But
and
it's not very good situation.
Yeah, in a very, very delicate situation, as you heard there, Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller saying on CTV's question period to Evan Sullivan, questions is where are we at as Canadians, and referring to other events that have happened in the past, some of them, ending, with fatal consequences. So, as you say, Bob, it's going to be very difficult to sort of see where things end up. But in the end, we are seeing everyone involved in all of this feeling the impact.
Well, there's two things. Yeah,
we're almost out of
Could I
time,
just say
but
one
really
last
quickly,
thing?
Bob.
Sure. There are opportunities we can take in Western Canada to get the system back to full speed in case there's more disruptions. And the minister could help us. We've requested he rescind his emergency order for 14 days to help to do that. And again, the other thing, I think the governments at all levels have to send stronger signals to protesters that are just disrupting and causing havoc that is unrelated to the situation in Belleville.
All right, Bob Masterson, President and CEO of the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada. Thanks again, Bob.
Thank you.